whatever you do, don't put these foods into your freeze dryer. My freeze dryer is one of my favorite things that I have ever purchased for myself. But one of the most common questions I get about freeze drying food is what foods you can and cannot freeze dry. I've got 10 foods to share with you that you should not put into your freeze dryer because it can either ruin your freeze dryer, the food just won't do anything inside of the freeze dryer, or it'll go rancid after the fact and won't become shelf stable. We're gonna count down from 10 to 1, and not in any particular order of 1 being worse than number 10, but my number 1 food to not put in your freeze dryer is hilarious. And if you've been around on my channel for a while, you've seen me make this food in here in my freeze dryer room, and what a disaster it was. Number 10 on our list is butter. Foods that are very high in fat do not freeze dry. They do not do well in the freeze dryer. They can make things messy in there, and they just don't fully freeze and then dry to give you that nice preserved food. So butter, high in fat, we're not freeze drying it. The number 9 food we're not gonna freeze dry is honey. As much as I love honey, and it would be so cool if you could get it into a powdered form with your freeze dryer, Harvest Right says do not freeze dry honey. It's a sticky mess and you're not supposed to. I have seen powdered honey for sale. How do they make it? Tell me. But honey is something that lasts forever anyway. There's not really a need to preserve it unless you're trying to get something like honey powder, which I would love. If you know the secrets, let me know. Number 8, jams and jellies. You can't freeze dry them. Jams or jellies are very high in sugar and do not do well in the freeze dryer, so don't freeze dry these. Stick to canning. That is something that is on my bucket list this summer. Okay, summer's practically over here, but okay, in the next month, I am gonna learn how to can jam. Homemade jam is one of my favorite sweet treats. I buy this for my kids' sandwiches. They don't even like it very much, but I think if I made my own, they would love it. So be on the lookout for some canning content in the future. Number 7, chocolate. Chocolate does not do anything in the freeze dryer besides melt. So if you're freeze drying just chocolate, it ain't gonna do anything. However, you can freeze dry certain candies that have chocolate in them if they have another ingredient inside of them that will freeze dry. My absolute favorite chocolatey candy to freeze dry are caramel M&Ms. They break the shell apart and the caramel inside expands and becomes crunchy, but the chocolate still stays like a chocolate texture. So you have the crunch of the caramel, the softness of the chocolate, and then the crunch of the outer shell. They are so good. I wish I had a bag of caramel M&Ms freeze dried to show you, but they all sold out when we had our last big garage sale, freeze dried candy sale. So I don't have any to show you, but they're so good. I do have a video when I made caramel M&Ms that I will tag up here if you want to see how they look when they're freeze dried, because they're so good. But just so you know, chocolate on its own, no. Number 6. Number 6 is peanut butter. Peanut butters are too high in fat and oils and stuff like that. Not gonna freeze dry. Don't waste your time. Don't put it in the freeze dryer. I wish you could, because one of the things I love to buy to mix in like my protein shakes and stuff is the PB2, the powdered peanut butter. I don't know how they make it. Do they just grind up peanuts really finely and then they're a powder? I don't think they freeze dry it unless there's some other method that I don't know about, but recommended from Harvest Right is that you don't freeze dry peanut butter, so peanut butter's a bye-bye. Here's what's up in Alaska. The other weekend, we got to go to my absolute favorite event that takes place in Alaska. Every other year, the military base here, it's a joint Air Force and Army base, they open up to the public and put on this amazing air show. It is called Arctic Thunder. The Thunderbirds come out and fly their amazing jets, and they do all kinds of other flight demonstrations like parachuting. They do like active war scenarios where they're like dropping bombs and sending in troops to help rescue injured people, like all these big fun reenactments. It was so cool. The weather this day was absolutely beautiful. It was amazing and makes me proud to be an American. The 5th food we are not gonna freeze dry. Did you guess it? Oils. No olive oil, no avocado oil, no oils. Again, it's just a high fat food that's not gonna freeze dry. It's not gonna preserve. Don't put it in your freeze dryer. I try to avoid cooking with lots of oils too when I am making meals for the freeze dryer. I do as little as possible just because too much oil can cause your food to go rancid after a while when it's on your shelf. So I just try to not use much of it. I will say that I have freeze-dried meats that have fat in them, like ground beef. I have freeze-dried brisket. I have freeze-dried pork chops that have fat on them. I try to trim off most of the fat, but there's still some fat left on there. And they have all done well and been fine. So, I mean, it's kind of, obviously, when you're going to use your freeze-dried food, you're gonna wanna check it, smell it, just make sure it's not rancid. But I have used my freeze-dried brisket that sat on the shelf for almost a year, and it was perfect. So, you can freeze-dry some things with fat, but just take off as much as you can. At least that's what I do. You do you. The number 4 item that does not freeze dry well are baked goods like breads, cakes, muffins, that kind of thing. So you technically can freeze dry bread. Even when you purchase a freeze dryer, the first thing that you run through your freeze dryer is bread. It's called the bread run, and you squirt it down with, you spray your bread with a mixture of like vinegar and water, and then you freeze dry it. That just helps get your freeze dryer cleaned out and all the chemically smells and stuff out of there. You do not eat the bread that you freeze dry in that run, you throw it out. But that's called the bread run. So that's what you're gonna do the first time you use your freeze dryer, if you didn't know about that. So when you freeze dry breads or cakes, muffins, that kind of thing, they become dry and crunchy and hard and just not pleasant. And I have not found or heard of a way to reconstitute them to where they like come back to their normal texture. So that's just something I don't freeze dry or preserve. I have freeze dried like in a I did a biscuits and gravy casserole where there were chunks of like biscuits in there. And that worked out fine because when I reconstitute it, it's more of just like a moist casserole texture. I wasn't going for it to be just like normal biscuits. It's all like mixed together with the sausage and the gravy. So I mean, that worked fine that way, but it's still gonna be more of a moist, wet texture than like a fresh baked bread texture. So, breads. We're not freeze drying. Do you have any idea what this is? If you watched my last video, you do. But this is our number 3 thing that we can't freeze dry. Mayo. Again, it's something that's made out of pretty much pure oil and eggs and some lemon juice. It's not gonna freeze dry. You gotta just make it fresh. But homemade mayo. If you missed this video, I will tag it here. This is a good one. It was so easy, like shockingly easy, and it's so good. Number 2 is candy. Now, don't get scared. You can freeze dry lots and lots of candy. But there are some candies that do not work, and it stinks to load up a tray of candy, stick it in the freeze dryer, and then have it not turn out and it be a huge waste of time. So I'm gonna tell you what candies have not worked for me, the candies that I have not tried just because I have heard from others that they do not work. But I will tell you my favorite candies to freeze dry, because freeze dried candy is one of the reasons why I bought my freeze dryer, because I love freeze dried candy. So candies that are very high in cornstarch tend to not do well in the freeze dryer. I have a video that I will tag here where I tried to freeze dry hot tamales, which sounded so good to me at the time, like a puffed up, crunchy, cinnamony tamale with the freeze dried texture sounds like it would be so good. Unfortunately, they do not work. They just heat up and get warm in the freeze dryer and get like soft, but they do not get crunchy. I tried multiple methods in the video up here and nothing worked. So hot tamales, no. Other candies like Swedish Fish, Sour Patch Kids, I've tried both of those. They're very cornstarchy candies, I guess. They do not do anything in the freeze dryer. Other gummy candies can, like gummy bears I have freeze dried and they turn out sometimes really well. Gummy worms work really well. A lot of it is just trial and error, but candies with a texture of like Swedish Fish, Sour Patch Kids, that type of thing, they're not gonna do good. Licorice is another one that I wish would freeze dry. I'm a huge Red Vines fan. And like having a crunchy textured Red Vine sounds so good, but it doesn't do anything. So what candies do work? Lots do. Probably the most popular are freeze-dried Skittles. This is how they look when they are freeze-dried. They break apart, puff up, become crunchy, yummy, delicious. Skittles are always a hit, especially sour Skittles. I love those. Starbursts are really good. I learned a trick for freeze-drying Starbursts. You have to unwrap all of them. If you heat them in the oven before putting them into your freeze dryer at like 200 degrees for like 5 minutes, just until they start to get a little bit melty, not fully melted. You then put them straight into the freeze dryer when it's already warmed up and come to temperature. Freeze dry them. They get a lot more airy and puffy when you do it that way. They're really good. Jolly Ranchers are always a hit also. They're like, you know, this big, but they puff up into balls like huge. So I have to cut Jolly Ranchers in half, sometimes in thirds when I freeze dry them, because they will hit the roof of the shelf in here. So you gotta be careful with these. Definitely cut them up, but they're really good. And lastly, probably my all-time favorite freeze-dried candy. It's hard to just pick one to be my favorite, but I think this is it. Big Hunk. I never liked Big Hunk just as a candy on its own, but when it is freeze-dried, they puff up into these beautiful white pillowy clouds of deliciousness with a little bit of peanuts mixed in there, but they are so good. If you're not a Big Hunk fan, you gotta try them freeze dried. They're so good. I can never find these in stores, so I have to order them on Amazon. I will link them in my video description if you want to try Big Hunks in your freeze dryer. So good. If you haven't heard, right now, Harvest Right is doing a big sale for the month of August. Freeze dryers are an extra $500 off, and they are giving you free shipping, which is a great deal. This is their same deal that they do for Black Friday. So if you are wanting to purchase a freeze dryer, now is a great time to do it. I so appreciate when you use my affiliate link to make your purchases. It helps support me, and as a thank you, I will send you a thank you goodie bag. I am choosing 3 people who order freeze dryers this month to send $25 Amazon gift cards to, along with the little goodie bag that I already give, which is my I'd freeze dry that magnet right here. Isn't it so cute? I love it. I give you this with some other little goodies as a thank you. But in order to claim or be entered into the gift card giveaway, you need to send me an email. It will be listed right here on the screen, and all the info will be in the video description below, just so you know. But good time to buy a freeze dryer, month of August. Drum roll, please. My number 1 food to not freeze dry. We're able to guess. Hot dogs. Don't freeze dry hot dogs. Take it from my personal experience. It made the nastiest mess in my freeze dryer. It took me a very long time to clean it up. The oils and the nastiness spewed out of the hot dogs, and it was disgusting. I thought having a freeze-dried hot dog would be so convenient for like camping trips and stuff with my kids, because you don't have to keep them refrigerated. They could just be shelf stable until you go to use them, rehydrate them in water, bada bing, bada boom, you got a fresh hot dog. But my experiment failed. It did not work. Don't freeze dry hot dogs. Look at this nasty freeze dryer that I got to clean up, but you know, it was a nice little lesson to learn. I hope this video was informative for you. If you have any more foods that you know do not freeze dry well, or that you should never put into your freeze dryer that I did not have on this list, please put them in the comments below so that everyone can see. We can maybe get a nice big long running list. And I think that will help all of us who are trying to learn more about our freeze dryers and what's good for them and what's not. It would be great to have that all in one place in the comments below this video. So if you got any more ideas that I missed, stick them there. Thank you all so much for watching. I will put another video right here of one of my absolute favorite things to make with my freeze dryer, which are MRE meals. This was a good one. So if you haven't seen it yet, check it out, and I will catch you all in the next video. Bye.